Good evening. I'd like to thank you for coming tonight. My name is Walt Manchester, and I'll be moderating. Tonight, you get a chance to hear from many of the candidates that are running for state and local office. Tonight, we have Bill Diamond, Crystal Rogers, Jessica Fay, Greg Foster, Sue Austin, Ann Gass, Sheila Bork, Bob Goslin, Kate Levier, and Jake Stoddard, and Marshall Bullock, who we'll start with 2 minutes from each candidate to get a chance to make an opening statement, and we'll start with Mr. Diamond.
Thank you, Walt. Full house, a lot of candidates. It's like the legislature. Thank you for inviting me tonight. Basically, I want to just say a couple of words about where we are in the legislative process, what's going on. As you probably heard, we adjourned, sine die, that means without day, and not having completed a lot of the very important items that still face us, which includes tax conformity, funding of jails, which is a big deal, direct care workers, the funding of that, which runs out. The increase runs out on June 30. And there's a whole litany of other things that go, that I would guess another 6 or 8 bills that we really need to give some attention to. A lot of those include funding of one manner or another. I am optimistic that we'll go back before the 10 days out from June 30. The reason I say 10 days out, whatever we do, we have to provide a 10-day window for the governor to provide his veto. He usually takes the full 10 days. So we have to build the 10-day period in and then back up another day for line item vetoes. So when you look at that, we're back to the 19th of June. The primary is the 12th. So we are getting close to a real difficult time when we need to do something. And again, these are not issues that we really can walk away from, nor should we. I think hopefully the people who have been arguing about this can sit down and now look at things a little differently. There's been some time to cool tempers. But it's one of those things where for us not to act would be irresponsible. Even if you look at just any of those items that I mentioned, the jail funding, for example, we just can't turn that back to the towns and expect them to pick up that kind of cost. No, I don't think they would. So anyway, my time is up, but I would just lay out here, there's a lot of issues we need to look at, we need to address, and I think the time has come for us to stop squabbling and get to work.
We have 2 candidates here tonight for Representative District 66, Jessica Fay and Greg Foster. And Jessica, would you like to be first?
I'd love to. Thanks, Walt, and thanks to the Vitalization Committee for putting this together. I think this is the first time in a while we've had something like this in Raymond, so it's a really great opportunity to say hi. My name is Jessica Fay, and I'm the state.
Isn't very loud.
The mic isn't loud? How do I control that?
This is just for recording.
Oh, okay. I'll talk a little louder then. Sure. So I'm State Representative Jessica Fay, and I represent House District 66, which is part of Raymond, part of Poland, and part of Casco. I think Senator Diamond laid out where we are in the legislature right now fairly well, so I'll leave that there, and if there's any questions later on, I'm happy to answer them. I am serving my first term, and I'm here, obviously. I'm running for re-election. Many of you may know me, but a few of you may not. I'm a summer person who stayed. So in 1955, my grandfather built a camp out on the end of Raymond Cape, and I spent my summers here as a kid. And I learned to love the area and the town. And back in 1999, my husband was offered a job here, and I wouldn't say I dragged him kicking and screaming. I think he was pretty willing to come. But we moved here and we settled in Raymond, and it's been home for for almost 20 years now, and we love it here. I'm a small business owner. I owned Raymond Village Florist. We started that in 2000, and am still currently doing weddings and events when I'm not working at my legislative job. I'm a member of the Environment and Natural Resources Committee, and I love that, and it's a perfect fit for here because we have so many lakes and ponds. Water quality is such an integral part of our economy and our and it's just important and vital to the area. And Walt tells me that my 2 minutes are up, so it's nice to see so many friendly faces, and I hope for some great questions.
And next we have Greg Foster, also for House District 66.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me tonight. And I also am a candidate for the same district that Jessica Fay mentioned, part of Poland, part of Raymond, and part of Casco. I'm a native Mainer. I was born in Bangor in 1956. That was quite a few years ago. My family moved to Gray in 1961 when I was 4 years old. I went to Gray New Gloucester schools, graduated in 74, and went on to college to become a forester. And I graduated from the University of Maine in 1979, and I took a job with the state of Maine. I worked as a state forester for a number of years. I worked with the Bureau of Public Lands. And at some point I got done, that was around 1986. I went to work for Hancock Lumber, managing their forest property, mostly in the Casco area, somewhere around 11,000 acres. I got done with them and went to work for La Valley Lumber in Sanford, where my job was to orderly buy logs for the mill to keep the mill running, white pine saw logs. And my dad retired from the state of Maine as a state forester many years prior to that, and he continued a consultant forestry business. And in 1994, he asked me if I was interested in being a consultant and going into business with him. So I said yes, and we formed Timber State G, and I've been doing consultant forestry ever since. I own and run my own business, and I've generated my own work from that time until now, and hopefully for a lot longer time. I've been a Raymond resident for about 30 years. I've served on several committees in this town, and currently I'm on the planning board and serve as vice chair. And I'm basically running as a Republican because I'd like to advance the Republican LePage agenda in terms of, I believe it's done a good job of maintaining our economy, and I would like to see it improve. Thank you.
We have two candidates tonight for House District 67, Sue Austin and Ann Gass. And I would turn it over first to Sue Austin.
Good evening. Walt, thank you very much. Thank you for asking all of us here. This is a great opportunity. I hope you can hear me. Can you? Is it a little bit better? Joe says, bring it up a notch. Okay, I'll do it. I'll make believe I'm in caucus. I'll do it. My hometown is your neighbor in Gray. I've served over there in many capacities. I started out on school board, so I had a relationship with your school district early on when your children came over in tuition to our high school, and that was a great relationship. And then I moved on to having a relationship through the town council. We developed the mutual aid agreement, which was very beneficial to both of us. And then let me just start out by saying I made a little joke when we were in Casco about 2 weeks ago. I said that within the week I would be starting my 49th year of marriage, so we weren't really the honeymooners. But when we were the honeymooners, we came to Raymond. And we rented one of the little dielectric homes, one of the little Cape Cod, sweet, sweet little spot on 121, and we lived there for our first year of marriage. So I do have some roots here. And I do have family roots too. I'd love to bore anybody with that later on the side. But back to, I ran first for a position, district position of Gray New Gloucester, served that, and then moved on to Gray and North Yarmouth and Pownell. And then we had our census again, and I was lucky enough to come up here and serve you. This is just about the end of my 4th year. I serve first on the business committee, and now I'm on the labor and commerce, so pretty much stayed right in that same vein for all the 12 years I've been in Augusta. And that is a real good fit for me. I love that spot. I've enjoyed it, and really try to do a lot of really good things regarding legislation, et cetera, to help our small businesses, which we all need, as you well know, in any small town. So I hope you'll consider me, and I'm just really glad to be here, so we'll have some good dialogue. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. Next, Ann Gass is the other candidate for District 67.
Yes, thanks to the Vitalization Committee for having us tonight. And I brought a prop. I am running for District 67, and you can see in the purple, this is where the district goes. So it's most of Gray, and then Raymond, and then a bit of Casco over there. So that's the district. If you haven't seen it before, and I'll leave the map up here so you can take another look. Just a little bit about me. I've lived in Gray for 30 years. I moved there the same year that my husband and I got married. We raised our kids there. They're now off on their own, living in another state. We hope they'll come back to Maine at some point. I have done a lot of work at the local level in Gray. I've just always been a volunteer my whole life. In Gray, I've served on the school board, on the Comprehensive Plan Committee, Zoning Board of Appeals, Community Economic Development Committee, and about 6 years ago, I started a Bike Ped Committee, a citizen-led group that really was designed to have an organized voice for bike and pedestrian safety in Gray. And we're actually really starting to do some great things. I'd be happy to talk about that in more detail later on if you're interested. I am a published author. I wrote a book about my great-grandmother. Her name was Florence Brooks Whitehouse. I'm actually doing a talk on this next Tuesday in Casco, and I will at the library there, and we'll be doing one here at the Raymond Library in September. So if you're interested, you can come and see that. It's a great, great history. My roots in Raymond go actually back to my great-grandmother and her husband who bought land on the north side of Panther Pond. Camp Hines became our neighbor later on, and it's been in the family ever since. My siblings and I still own it. And I've done land conservation here. I worked with the town and the Luneco Land Trust and the Boy Scouts to preserve land along the Tenny River. So I have deep roots here and have been coming to Raymond my whole life. In my business, I'm self-employed. I have been there have my own business for 25 years, and it's got a lot of relevance to the work that I would do in the legislature. We can talk about that more too.
Thank you. We actually, the next candidate is for the select board. We have one candidate here tonight, Marshall Bullock.
First, I want to thank Walt and Sharon Dodson for putting this event on tonight. Thank you very much. These are my notes. When I showed them to my wife, she said, well, you might want to hang on to those for 15 years or so. I might need those. I broke this out into 3 parts, trying to make it quick. Personally, born in Maine, I have family roots that go back at least 200 years in the state of Maine. I lived in Falmouth in the summer, or lived in Falmouth in the winter and Raymond in the summer for most of that high school years. I moved to New Haven, Connecticut after my military service. Then I moved back to Raymond in 1995 permanently. I'm degreed from Sacred Heart University in business with a minor in economics and degreed from USM in a self-designed major with a minor in education. Married, 2 children, 2 grandchildren. Professional side of me. I have 6 years United States Army, United States, various other foreign countries. I have 20 years experience in the commercial banking business, and I cut my teeth in that business repossessing cars in New Haven, Connecticut. And I worked myself all the way up to senior vice president and chief lending officer of a bank in the greater Hartford area. After 20 years of that, I decided I didn't want to work with my head, I wanted to work with my hands, so I bought a cabinet company. And I ran a cabinet and worked in a cabinet company for 10 years. Then I got tired of losing a thumb, went back to school for 6 months, picked up what I needed for an education degree, and I taught high school and college for 11 years. I have a license in education for K7 and 12 for history and for business, social studies. Political side of me. I was appointed to the Budget Finance Committee in 2006, re-elected 3 times. I've been on several committees in town, including Tasseltop, Vitalization, Compensation Committee, etc. I have 12 years of institutional knowledge I'm bringing to the table, and I look forward to serving you as a selectman. Thank you.
We have several candidates here tonight for the Budget Finance Committee. For the 3-year term, we have Sheila Bork and Bob Goslin. And then for the 2-year term, we'll hear from Crystal Rogers. So first, if I could invite Sheila Bork up.
Hello, I'm Sheila Burke, obviously. I know many of you in the audience. For those that don't know me, I feel like sorry, Bill. I'm an immigrant. I was not born in Maine. I was actually born in Massachusetts, went off to the Midwest, the Chicago region for college. If you recall 1975 and what was happening in New England, work was tough to find. So I stayed in Chicago for 40 years. I actually selected to move to Maine and to the town of Raymond when I retired. I've been a resident for 6 years now. I completed a bachelor's in urban studies, a master's in public administration, and I've spent my entire professional career in the nonprofit and government sector. The last 30 years of my career, I worked for the state of Illinois, in such positions as Director of Human Resources, Strategic Planning, and the last 10 years of my career as a Chief Information Officer, running 400 computers across 3 cities in a 24/7 operation. It was a higher education financing. We were the scholarships, student loans, and grants. Our budget's one of our largest grants programs, about $150 million a year. We were a secondary market and also a 529 tuition investment program. So I have a lot of budget chops, you could say. I think very simply, the reason I'm running for this position is I believe in community. Bottom line, here in Raymond, in my brief time, I am now secretary of the Loon Echo Land Trust Board. I'm the president of the Raymond Village Library. I was recently elected chair of the Plan Board. I also help out with our Crescent Lake Watershed Association, and I'm an active member in the New Age Friendly Community Initiative here in Raymond. I find Raymond a wonderful community. I don't care what political background you come from. If you reach out a hand, somebody's there to grab it, and together we can make a difference. So that's why I'm running.
Thank you. And Bob Goslin will be our next candidate for Budget Finance Committee.
Hello, my name is Robert Goslin. I prefer Bob if you see me informally on the street. I am running for Budget Finance Committee. This is my 5th term. So I've seen a lot of the budget happenings in town. Our first purview involved the school when we used to have our own school system in town. And that has since gone to the RSU, and that purview was no longer available to us. But I continue to serve the town of Raymond because I've always been involved in some capacity, either as a coach, a scout leader, and now as the kids have flown the nest, to be able to go out and help the community in other manners. So, you know, I choose to say, I choose to be involved because I care very much for this community. Thank you.
And a candidate for the Budget Finance Committee for a 2-year term, Crystal Rogers.
Good evening. My name's Crystal Rogers, and I've lived in Raymond for 9 years with my husband and my 3 boys, Tyler, Caden, and Brendan. We have the cutest puppy in the world, Emmy. I swear she is the cutest. And we just added 8 chickens and 2 ducks to our family. 9 years ago, when my husband and I were looking for a home, I grew up in Westbrook, and my husband's like, all right, come on, we got to move out of Westbrook. And I wanted to find a place that I knew my kids could run outside and play and be safe. And I found it here in Raymond, so that's why we moved here 9 years ago. I'm a financial advisor, and I have an office with my mom in Westbrook on 302. So I help people, my clients, become debt-free and financially independent. And a few months ago, I was really interested in doing volunteer work within the community. So I hopped online and I'm like, well, what am I going to do? And I looked around and I came across the Budget and Finance Committee opening. I'm like, well, perfect, because that's my area is, as a financial advisor. So I'm like, I think I'd be a great fit to do this. I truly love living in Raymond, and I love the community feel here. So I just feel like it'd be a great spot for me. So thank you for having me.
Thank you. And we have 2 candidates tonight here for the RSU 14 Board of Directors, School Board, Kate Levier and Jake Stoddard. First, I'd like to invite up Kate Levier.
I appreciate you learning how to say that last name. It's a tough one. I'm sure no one will remember it after tonight. Thank you all so much. This is really wonderful to be here today. My family and I live in Raymond, and we have a daughter in kindergarten at Raymond Elementary. And as a mother, a lifelong Mainer, and a strong supporter of public education, I really do hope to serve as your Raymond representative for the school board. My husband and I have volunteered in many aspects of the community, both in the schools and in the rec program. I value the education my daughter's getting here. We absolutely love the community here in Raymond, and I'm looking forward to using my experience, my leadership and facilitation skills, as well as my love for education to make a positive impact on our community, really by getting us to work smarter, not harder. As the result of the work that I do in my day job, I know too well that our state is at a really critical point. We need to ensure that our community is educating our students to the best of their ability. We need to make sure that we're preparing them to be college and career ready, not college or career ready. I really want to see us increasing teachers' awareness of college and career readiness so that they can then counsel students for the best pathway and programs that exist in our community. So providing them with professional development opportunities so that they can offer really related advising services. We need to start our youngest students off with a strong foundation, supporting them as they transition from one school to the next, and encouraging our older students to explore multiple pathways through skill trade, vocational education, and college degrees. And we need to engage the future of our community to explore their passion while they're young and continuing with the many partnerships that exist in our schools. Of all of Maine's economic development strategies, education really has the greatest return on investment. And investment in education will create lifelong learners and produce civically engaged students who build some vibrant communities. I would be honored to serve as your representative to the school board. I'd be a strong, experienced, and passionate voice on the board. In my day job, I have the opportunity to see what's working in other communities, and I would be able to bring that experience to the board at no cost. And thank you again so much for having me here.
And finally, I'd like to introduce Jake Stoddard, our final RSU 14 candidate.
Thank you. I'd like to thank Walt and the Vitalization Committee for putting this this event on. I think these events are absolutely great, where you get to sit down and talk to the people that are running for these offices face to face, find out who they are and what makes them tick. I didn't prepare a speech for tonight. I kind of figured if I can't tell you who I am and why I'm running without cliff notes, I probably don't deserve the office anyway. Now, a lot of people will get up here and tell you that they believe in the greatness of education and they believe in education's ability to transform lives and end generational poverty. You know, that story, it always reminds me of the old Baptist preacher that was asked by a parishioner if he believed in full immersion baptism. And he says, believe in it? Why, hell, I've seen it. I'm the grandson of a man that dropped out of high school in the 10th grade to enlist in the army to go fight Hitler and the Axis powers of World War II because he believed that was an easier pathway than dealing with his abusive father on the farm in Vermont. But when he came back stateside after learning to drive a truck and operate heavy equipment, he met the love of his life who also dropped out of high school in the 10th grade. And they had 3 children together, ensuring that each one of them graduated from high school. My uncle went back to college later in life and is now a teacher in his hometown. And my brother and I are the first 2 in our family to go to college straight out of high school. My brother's a doctor, and I'm looking at going into law school. So I just don't believe in education. I have seen it and I have lived it, and that's why I'm running. When I met my lovely wife and we moved into the neighborhood that she grew up in, so we get to live around the corner from my mother-in-law, and my life is a little bit like Everybody Loves Raymond, but we get to live the dream. And when we moved into the neighborhood and our daughter started attending Raymond Elementary School, everything she brought home as far as what they were doing in the classroom seemed to be an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, photocopied out of a workbook somewhere, likely owned by either Pearson or Scholastic, which get all their materials approved through educational boards in either Texas or California. And I don't think Texas or California should have too much to do with what goes on in the classrooms in Raymond Elementary School. So I hope you ask us a lot of questions tonight. My time is up. I thank you all for listening, for being here. You know, I hope you can count. I hope you can support me, but I am going to ask for your vote.
Next, we're going to open it up to questions from the audience. I'm going to come around with the microphone, and I would ask that you ask your question into the microphone. It won't amplify your voice, it won't help us hear you, but it will be important for the recording and for the rebroadcast. And likewise, candidates, if I could ask you to try to work your way towards a microphone when you're answering the question. We have a cordless portable on this end that can move around a little easier, and then we have a couple corded mics down at the far end. So. Would anyone like to start? You just need to raise your hand. It works real well.
No, I can ask. Can we ask questions of legislative candidates?
I would think that would be reasonable. Yeah, sure. You just right from your seat there. You
I guess I can use this microphone too. So I would just like to ask the legislative candidates about what they plan to do with the minimum wage. This actually affects the school budget quite significantly. We have a lot of employees that work for maybe not minimum wage, but not much more than minimum wage. And at the current state right now, where we have an inflated minimum wage at $10 an hour, it's hard to recruit the talent and the people that we need for $12 an hour, $13 an hour jobs that work in self-contained special ed classrooms and whatnot. You know, how exactly are we going to manage this with such a high minimum wage when we have these positions that need to be filled? Are we going to absolutely ramp up the budget? And, you know, are you sitting on a pile of cash up in Augusta that you could pass down to the RSUs, or is there another solution?
And you're asking that to the 4 House candidates, or
to Senator Diamond and the candidates running for House?
Thank you very much. As you know, the minimum wage was passed by the voters. It was passed around the state. I'm not sure what the actual margin was, but the fact is we got it as a law, a state law, when it came to the legislature. There have been some proposals this year in both the House and the Senate to try to change that, to moderate it. That kind of thing never happens. That kind of a change I don't think will ever happen in the short session, which is what we're in right now. This has been a very contentious session, hence we adjourned sine die, as I mentioned earlier, without even finishing the basic work. So to find any resolution to this, to changing what the people voted for the minimum wage, I don't see it happening. Now I think when next year, when there's a new legislature, that very well could be given the time and the attention that this may be taken into consideration. But at the moment, I don't see anything happening. We've actually got, if we go back in, we'll have one day We'll have a 1 day for the session. We'll have a one after the appropriations does their work. We'll have 1 day for the line item and 1 day for the veto. So I can tell you right now, nothing's going to happen in terms of changing what the people voted on in terms of minimum wage. It just is not going to happen this session.
Oh, okay. So Senator Diamond is correct. The voters passed the minimum wage referendum, and it's the law. We did have a piece of legislation that didn't pass. So in terms of the minimum wage increase, I think it is where it is. It was passed in 2016, and it doesn't go up to $12 an hour until 2020. So there is some time for planning and budgeting. But I think Senator Diamond's correct. There's nothing that we're going to be able to do about it, at least this session. And I would say that the voters did pass it, and the referendum question read: do you want to raise the minimum wage to $12 an hour by 2020? There were a couple of other pieces of that. There was a tip credit piece, which we did tackle last session, and we did, at the request of both servers and restaurant owners, take that piece out. There have been some proposals for a slowdown. I think I hear a lot from my constituents about the will of the voters, and I'd be very reluctant to do that. However, and this makes me extremely unpopular in my caucus, I do think that there is room to assist small businesses with a training wage or a short-term sub-minimum wage. The one that was proposed in the last session was for 200 days, and I think you can train somebody to do a job in less than 200 days. So as a small business owner, I've seen it happen. I hope that answers your question.
Well, my question was more towards how it relates to the school budget and attracting talent at $12, $13, $14 an hour. If those same people can take a minimum wage job at $10, $11, $12 an hour by the time we get to 2020, which is really only in next year's budgeting cycle.
So we're right now at almost full employment, and I think if you're thinking about attracting folks who are good quality folks who work in the school system, I think paying those folks well is going to be a really good way to attract them.
Excuse me, I agree with both Bill and Jessica on many of these points. The point what our committee put forth was a bill to do a little bit of what I would call a modification, a step down over those next 3 years, because we were getting testimony from grocers, small business owners, especially along the outer rim, the northern rim, who just are struggling to make this first installment of the minimum wage going up. And they came down and they just said, we just don't know how we're going to be able to keep up with this. And this is not just one or two. We're talking about a lot of this sector is really crying for some help in that arena. And obviously, Cumberland County is in a little bit different situation, but up north, this is critical. And so you're talking about some of I'll call them the mom and pop stores that are in a region where if you miss the big store in the largest area near your home, the larger town, you've only got that little mom and pop to get your bread, your milk, etc., maybe a package of Pampers. And these folks need to be there for many of the reasons that we need any of our little convenience stores right in the center of our villages. So they're really struggling. They called out for help, and there was a bill, as Jessica has said, that sort of brought that down into a little bit lower step up over the next few years. That has really, as Bill said, it's really just, it came to a screeching halt because we ended session. So I don't know what will happen in another session. I do think that the training wage, which is also came out of our committee, is a good idea. People, if you're going to step up the minimum wage for people that are trained, for our young people who are trying to make their way to have that first job and that first experience that they can put on, let's call it their small resume, it's pretty hard for some of our smaller folks to be able to hire them to do just busing at a restaurant, some of the smaller tasks, run a cash register at a small farm stand. These folks need to have a little bit of time to be trained and trained well. That was the voice from the committee. The public.
Yeah, this is a hard issue. I appreciate the impact on the school board, the school budgets, having served on a school board myself, and also with small businesses and nonprofits. In my business, my clients are nonprofits and local and state governments, so they're struggling as well. But I would also point out that the $10, $12 an hour is still not a housing wage, in especially in Cumberland County. In order to rent the average, 2-bedroom apartment, you need a hourly wage of $18. So, people who are who get the benefit of this increase in the minimum wage are still going to be finding themselves priced out of the housing market and struggling to pay for insurance if they have student loan debt or car payments or daycare or those kinds of things. They're going to have trouble meeting all of those expenses. Only 1 in 4 people in the state gets, or nationally, gets any kind of assistance from public assistance programs around housing. There's just not a lot of help for them. And I would just say that poverty is not a moral problem, it's a math problem. And the way to fix that is to increase wages and to help reduce costs where we can. So it is a hard problem. I'd certainly be willing to listen to proposals, but that's kind of as I go door to door, I find a ton of families who are, the 20, 30 somethings are still living with their parents because they just can't afford to move out.
I don't think I have a choice. I have to answer this. Everyone else did. I did not vote for the referendum on minimum wage. I'm not sure that I think government should have their fingers in minimum wage. I often wonder why not deal with a maximum wage as well. We're one end of the spectrum, why not the other? But I believe I'm a capitalist. I believe in competition between companies and even schools, and I think the charter schools are great. I think having an opportunity to take your child to a school of your choice is a wonderful thing, and I think that would have a positive effect on wages. If you pick a school that you want to take your child to, or that school becomes popular and other people want to go there, they will pay to take their kid to that school. That's my answer.
Questions from the audience?
This one directed to the two folks running for a school board. Excuse me. Right now there's a fair amount of contention in some areas between Windham and Raymond. As a potential new member to the board, what do you think is the most important thing to focus on to manage the Windham-Raymond relationship within RSU 14?
Jake, why don't you go first?
Well, I think the most important thing is whichever one of us gets elected, the first thing we have to do is to meet our colleagues, to sit down across the table from one another, tell them who you are and what makes you tick. And second off, we have to get down to, what are the contentious barriers? Is it just the transportation building, the budget, whatnot? And come forward with, the facts, just the facts, sir, just the facts. And why is there this contention, and what is our solution, and why do we feel that that our position is in the better is the better stake and the best stake for the students. Because the bottom line is at the end of the day, this position is not about Wyndham and Raymond. It's not about, you know, what happened in the Baldacci administration that put us together. It's doing the right thing to support the students and allow them not just to get an education or get into college, but to thrive in their educational endeavor. That has to be our number one priority. And I think sitting down, understanding who the players are, why you're coming to the table with the position that you are, we can talk about contentious issues even in this society today. It can happen. It has to come forward from a positive position, knowing that this is just the way that I feel, this is the way that my constituents feel, this is the solution that I feel is the best, because at the end of the day, people that live just across the line on 302 want the same thing for their students that we want for ours.
You know, I really think that when it comes to the RSU and the melding together and when all that happened, we need to get back to making sure that it's an equal partnership. And I feel like from what I've heard, you know, I sat down and talked with Joe a little bit before just to hear a little bit more about how all of that has been working, and there's not an equal partnership happening. So for me, it's sitting down, it's talking to the school board members, it's hearing from community members, it's informing them about what's happening in the schools and with the RSU, and trying to make the best determination for the students.
I was going to keep my mouth shut, but I just can't. So you said on the minimum wage it's the law, so you can't do anything. Well, the 3% tax increase was the law, and you abolished it. So you can't have it both ways. You either can or you can't. Where do you now stand on this huge tax increase in the November referendum? To all the legislative candidates.
Thank you. What Joe is talking about is a proposed 3.8% increase on income over $128,400 per year. The biggest problem that I see with that, and I do not favor it, is the fact that it's going to impact small businesses, especially Corp S businesses, because as you know, if you're a small business person, if you know a small business person, your money comes through, and you may not be taking it home, and you probably are not, but it's counted as income. So it will not, even though you may reach that threshold of $128,400, that does not mean that you're not going to be taxed, because you are. So if you were taking that home, I guess I might have I guess I'd still have some concerns about it. But it's really going to be an unfair balance for any small business that is a sub-S. That's a small business that takes their money, they cannot invest it, but if they do invest it, or if they want to buy equipment or whatever it is, that still could be called income. So my problem is the threshold is too easy to get to, and I think it's going to take a big hit. The small business people will take a big hit as a result of that.
Does that mean you're against it?
That means I'm against it.
Can we start at the other end of the legislative panel here?
Oh, sure, absolutely. Yeah, this is one that I've been looking at. I'm still considering it. Still have some concerns about it. I'm not convinced. You know, we've tried levying taxes on products or people before in order to raise cash, and that hasn't been popular with the voters. So I'm interested to see how other people will respond, but that's not one that I've been you know, pleased with and looking forward to voting for myself in the upcoming election.
I am not supporting that. I think that this is another case that was similar to the piece that we had before on the surcharge on education. And what ended up happening was that we paid a big price to take that levying tax off from the young people. It was a combined income for households, just like this is. I think this is the wrong way to go. We educate our children. We talk about education, getting professions, getting good trades, being able to support themselves, being able to settle down in communities, get roots developed, and commit to helping those communities, and then we turn around and do this to that kind of a level of income, and I think that's just regressive. So I won't be supporting that.
Neither do I support that. I don't think there's anything more to say than that, except that I don't think much good often comes out of tax increases.
So I also don't support it. One of the things that I've learned in my last 2 years in the legislature is that making tax policy through citizens' initiative is makes it really challenging for the legislature to actually do its job and make it work. As Joe pointed out, we dealt with the 3%, and that was hard. And there are a lot of voters that were not happy with us for that. But in order to make good tax policy, I've seen the tax committee work really, really hard and spend a lot of time and energy in compromise, talking about what the law of unintended consequences would be. And I think Bill mentioned a number of those. But no, the goal is laudable. I'm part of the Raymond Age Friendly Community initiative, and we've got a core group of 20 older people who are really committed to wanting to stay in Raymond and participate and add wisdom and talent to our community. So the goal is laudable, but I just don't see how this initiative is workable and gets us to where we want to be.
So sort of a follow-up to that then. If that's not the answer, if the referendum question from a couple of years ago was not the answer, what is the answer to getting the state to pay its share of school funding the way the voters decided many years ago, twice now, that it should be at 55% of school funding? We've got school budgets that are constantly being cut. Some people voting against them, not supporting them. I understand that. People on fixed incomes. How do we get the state to pay its share of public education? To anyone that has an answer.
I don't have an answer. I don't know. I think we need to be serious about it, and we did make some strides in the last budget towards increasing that funding to 55%. I can't remember the number now, so I'm not going to say it on mic. But I think we should be listening and open to any ideas. And if anybody has an idea of how we can accomplish that, then I think we should listen as legislators.
The very small nugget that I will add is that it seems like every 2 years we face this, and every 2 years the goalposts change. First something is included, then it is not included, then there's more included, and every time you change that what do I want to call it, quotient, the 55%, it just keeps eluding the legislature. I think the legislature does a great deal towards reaching that, because that has been an edict and a public cry. But it is a tremendous amount, and as I said, it seems to be a very, very flexible and moving target, and I don't say target with the wrong reference.
Yeah, I just very briefly, I mean, I'm seeking the seat for the first time, so I don't have the benefit of the experience in the legislature, but I would look at other programs that can be, reduced or modified or cut to generate more income for education. I know that's not easy either, because there are constituencies for all of that funding. But in my work, I've done I've worked with nonprofits and local and state governments on program design and planning, and really it's kind of a business planning process. So I worked with them to try and figure out how to get the most bang out of their public dollar. And I would just apply those kinds of strategies to the programs that we're funding now, and see whether or not they're ones that can be modified or reduced in order to make room for more education funding.
How do I think of this? I decided to send my daughter to a private school in New Gloucester. We paid somewhere around $2,200 a year for that daughter to go there. I guess in my mind I say, why does it cost $13,000 to send a child to school now. And maybe it isn't the funding issue. Maybe there's something else we have to look at. But as I said earlier, I'm a capitalist, and I believe competition between schools to get kids to go to their school might be a positive thing. I don't know that we've really looked into it more seriously than the charter schools. But like I said, how could I send my daughter for just $2,200 to a private school at the same time it was costing a heck of a lot more at the public school?
Mr. Moderator, can I? Oh, sorry.
I mean, that is the question that we face every year. I served on the Appropriations Committee for 4 years, was Senate Chairman 2 years. Joe Bruno served on Appropriations. If you've been on that committee, everybody's at you to fund everything else. But I will say this, that education is always one of the top priorities. It really is. And because we haven't got to the 55% doesn't mean we haven't tried and will try. If you combine the two budgets of Health and Human Services and Education, that's 80% of the budget. 80%. That leaves 20% for everything else. So because we haven't gotten there, it's not because we haven't tried, and we don't think education is very, very important. It's just that it's a difficult thing to do. The 3%, when that was done away with last session, it was 161 million was put in education, which is what that originally was intended for. So all I can say is the intent and it is there. We want to do all we can with it, but it's really a difficult attainment.
Mr. Starter, did you want to comment on the subject?
Yeah, I just wanted to make one quick comment. First of all, it's not 55% of education. It's not. Our budget is roughly 46 million, I believe, that we'll be voting on June 12th. It's not 55% of that. It's 55% of the essential programs and services, the EPS formula. That is the 55% that we are talking about. RSU 14 voted at the validation referendum to increase the spending over and above the 55%. So if you take state subsidy and you look at our budget, when it comes in well below 55%, that doesn't mean that the state isn't meeting their share. It means that we are spending over and above the EPS formula. The EPS formula, the last numbers that I saw, the state was roughly around 52%. So it's a little bit of a misnomer and disingenuous when people start arguing about, are we meeting the 55%? And the other thing about that is, I would say this comes back to citizens referenda process, which people walked in and voted on one line, and then we wrote the law after and determined out what it meant. I think it's part and parcel of a broader situation, but we need to stop mentioning that it's 55% of education. It's 55% of EPS.
Any other questions?
This doesn't have to do with finance. I want to direct this to Mr. Stoddard. When you were speaking, you referred to the elementary school and the 8.5 by 11 worksheets. What were you alluding to? Change in the program? Change in the curriculum? What was that?
I am so happy you asked me that question. This is the reason that I'm running. Our classrooms, I believe, should be the most creative, engaging places that students want to come to and learn, that inspire an academic curiosity about the world around them. And I don't think that's done by walking in and looking at a photocopied page. There is so many avenues to empower our teachers and let them do what works for their classroom. Now, I want to come back for 1 second, because this was pretty much the day I said I'm going to take out papers and I'm going to run for this seat. I was walking into Raymond Elementary School. I pick up my daughter just about every day. I work Fridays, so she has to go to Grammy's house that day. But I walk in and I pick her up, and there's this guy. He's loading the ski equipment into the back of a Jeep. And I say, oh, this is great, you know, we have a ski program. We didn't hear anything about it, which is a communications policy that I think needs to be looked at and tore up and written a new one. But we didn't hear anything about it. What's this ski program? How does this work? He's like, well, it's a partnership through the rec and the school, which is a great idea. I think we should maximize that. He's like, but this year it costs a lot more money than it did than it did when my kids started. It was over $300 for a student to participate in the ski program this year because they had to rent a bus from RSU 14. Well, we talk about two mains and we talk about up north. We don't need to go up north to look at this. We can drive out 85. And you can see the two mains. You can see Raymond Cape. You can see out towards Casco and whatnot. I think that when we have a ski program in the school costing $350, that precludes a lot of kids from even beginning to think about joining, and that is a problem. But last year, and I wish one of the state candidates had mentioned that, the state legislature put an extra $162 million in the state budget to fund education. RSU 14 got over $600,000 in extra resources. And what did we choose to do with that money? Who knows? Can I get a show of hands? Who knows what we did with that extra $600,000 that came into our budget? We took $120,000 and we hired a curriculum coordinator. Apparently a position we decided we didn't need when we put the budget out because it wasn't initially included in this year's funding. But we took $100,000 and we hired a curriculum coordinator, and that was it. We returned the rest to taxpayers, and I don't necessarily have a problem with that. But if we have $120,000 to hire a curriculum coordinator, we shouldn't have to charge the rec department for a bus to drive kids to the ski resort up in, look at me, I'm not a skier, the ski resort up in Bridgeton. Shawnee Peak, thank you, honey. That's the priorities that we should have. We should be about the kids, not who's got a job down at central office. The number one question every board member should ask is, how is this decision benefiting children?
Can I follow up really quickly?
Yes.
Because I volunteered for the ski program, it was only $222 for my daughter to do it, so I don't know who told you the $350. So it was, just in case anyone's interested in having their child do the ski program, it was not that much.
I'd still say I think 220 it would preclude a lot of students. Maybe I got that wrong. Maybe it was 220, not 320. But nonetheless, when the biggest expense is renting the bus from RSU 14, that's the problem.
This no longer actually affects me or my daughter, but my daughter's at Wyndham High now. Last year we tried to use the Wyndham Library and was told that she couldn't use it for free. We had to pay to use this library. And I'm like, we're part of RSU 14. This shouldn't cost anything because they should have reciprocal library usage, I would think. And I ended up going to Portland instead. But that should not happen. We should be able to use their library as RSU 14 members.
That's the town. I'm surprised town libraries wants to charge fees. I can tell you, we have an absolute fantastic library down off of Main Street, the Raymond Village Library. And by the way, every third Wednesday, Lucy the therapy dog comes in to read, to read with the children. I think I'm more excited about it than my daughter is, but nonetheless, we have an absolute fantastic library here.
The library was closed at that time. It's only open on certain days. So, I mean, she was in the 8th grade at that point, and she was doing a paper, so we had to go to Wyndham and couldn't use that library for free. My point is that somebody should be looking into why, on the school board, that costs our students to use that library when we're part of RSU 14.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I would agree with that just in the issue of we have students that might be staying after, and that's close to the high school, and there's no transportation for them to get to the library some other time. I mean, it puts a disadvantage to first-generation, low-income students to get back to the library when it's closed. So I would agree with you.
Do we have other questions for our candidates tonight?
I would like to direct this to the school board candidates, and I'd like to know some of the ways that you would like to, some of the things that you would suggest doing to reduce cost and spending when it comes to the RSU and some of the things that they've been spending money on.
Would you like to take that, Kate?
Sure. So, I think that we have such an amazing community here, and if there's ways that we can increase the partnerships with the community members and the schools, we have businesses who may want to come in and provide training to students. Chimbro does a lot of that stuff out where they are. We have the Associated General Contractors who would come in. So if there's any way that we could reduce some of the spending on the learning piece by having people come in, I think we're such an asset here with all the folks that we have and the businesses nearby.
I agree. I think I think collaborations between schools and the community and libraries and businesses. These are not separate entities. There shouldn't be silos here. The school is not in and of itself its own animal. It's a community school. There's ample opportunity for collaboration there. There's also ample opportunity for collaboration between districts and somebody help me with the word here, but off-site learning where advanced placement students can sit down with a computer in today's day and age and be in a classroom anywhere in the world instantaneously. We also duplicate the wheel when it comes to students. We all know that some people are going to be a little more accelerated and some people are going to be in the group that I'm in, and instead of trying to recreate the wheel and have every teacher working with every student in the classroom, there's no reason that a student who's in second grade but maybe is still working on first grade math skills can go into the classroom where it is, and that way you're not duplicating the wheel and trying to buttress that student in the situation that they're or in the classroom that they currently are in, but you're using the building and the building's resources and the school's resources as a whole. I think sharing learning in that way is a way that we can certainly bring down costs. Also, the other thing, and this is probably not going to make me popular, but what we know is summer slide. In a couple of weeks, all of our students are going to leave the schoolroom. They're going to have 10 weeks off, and you'll be able to watch the results taper off. We've known this for 100 years. The first study that noticed this and wrote about it was in 1909. Well, the reason why our school calendar is the way that it is now is because of the farm season. And yes, we still have agriculture as a big component in this state and in this community, but it's not as big as it was 109 years ago. I think if we adjusted the school calendar, we would save significant resources when it comes to extra supports to help students catch up to where they are. And the other thing that's hugely important about this is the students that are in a higher socioeconomic bracket don't have such a regression over that 10-week period as students that are in a lower socioeconomic bracket. We know through social science over 100 years worth of data that it doesn't matter if you're rich or poor, when you're in the same classroom, you make growth at roughly the same trajectory, but over that 10-week break, you see the poorer students fall off fall off the chart, as the richer students only fall off so much because they are exposed to things. Their parents can afford to go to the New England Aquarium or take a trip to New York or to the Maritime Academy and whatnot. So one of the things that I think would save significant resources, it would take a lot of effort to do it, and I wouldn't be very popular, is to look at shortening that 12-week break of school vacation.
Mine, sorry guys, it's going to go towards the school board. We have a serious lack of communication between our school board representatives in our town. We need to be heard. We have agreements. How are you going to be heard? Because you are one, and we only have 3 on the board out of a 9-person board. So I want to know how you guys are going to be heard, be able to carry on what's for the kids, because I hear what you're saying, but you deal at the upper level, and then the superintendent deals with everybody underneath of you is what it is. But right now, I think the people of Raymond need to be heard. They need to have answers back, and I want to know how you guys are going to do it. Thank you.
Jake, if you'd like to go first and keep it on the subject of communication.
Well, as I said earlier, I think communication at the district, at the district level is a problem anyway. The fact of the matter is that I think that the school should be presenting more information anyway. We don't even put out a newsletter. And I think that would be hugely important as a step one. As a step two, I think the school board this year was absolutely derelict in their duty when Fry Island came forward and we just, threw up our hands and said, we'll wait and see what happens. I think we could have put a little pressure on a state senator down at the other end of the table to help, to help Fry Island out of their situation, which would have only, helped our budget concerns to begin with. They're not happy with their agreement at 1.5 million. Maybe we can make them happy here at 1 million. And that would have another board member to level the balance. I think it's a problem when one town is so outnumbered in the, in the formula that you can double us, and Wyndham still has a +1 advantage. Now, as far as the fact of the matter is, how are you going to be heard? I'm really not that quiet, in case you can't tell. And sunlight, I do believe, is the best disinfectant. The town of Wyndham put out an ad campaign on their Taj Mahal that they're going to have as a transportation facility that said, win-win for Wyndham. 75% of this bond is going to be paid for by the town. 25% is going to be paid for by the school system. Well, I don't care if you call it a lease or an agreement or whatnot. If it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it is a duck. And the town of Raymond should have voted on that bond. And more people should know about it, whether it's, not necessarily an ad, but, op-eds in the Forecaster and the Wyndham Eagle and whatnot, that Title 20A and Title 30A says that if you are going to bond money in the state of Maine, the people need to vote on it. It needs to be approved by the voters. The gentleman that got up and spoke after I did at the validation meeting said the town of Raymond was heard. We were heard through our representatives. Yeah, well, sorry, son, it doesn't quite work like that. The voters should have had a chance to vote on that bond up, down, or indifferent. And the only way to get it out there is to put it out there and make your voice heard, whether it's through the newspaper or community access TV or a board member newsletter. But the fact of the matter is that the town of Raymond should have been heard on that issue, and I think that step one is to put it out there in any avenue that we can.
Candidate Levier?
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I think there is a big communications breakdown between the folks that are making some of these decisions and the rest of the community. I live in a neighborhood of approximately 10 or so households, and none of them had heard anything about the town maintenance facility or the plan to possibly secede from RC 14. So we need to figure out something that works. And sitting down and talking to each other is great, and I've reached out to both of you to sit down and talk to you guys just to hear your points as well, but we need to make sure that we're getting it out of this group of people that come to these things. And I think it's great to have the TV, but I'm of the generation that we don't have cable. So I don't see the I don't even know what it's called, the closed access television. So I love the idea, newsletters, Facebook pages, other ways that we have to get the word out there about what's happening in this community and engage our citizens, because they want to support the work that we're doing. I mean, that's part of the reason for me running, was I wanted to make sure that communication was happening at all levels and with the community.
I did. I wanted to ask a question. I thought the folks running for budget finance hadn't had any fun, so I think it would be
We're
nice
fine.
to ask them a question. So I'm curious if you could name what your priorities might be for the next town budget, and I guess this is a question for all three.
I've been. Why don't you go first?
I've been a really boring wife, and I've been watching, is it Channel 2, the Budget and Finance Committee recording, so I'd be kind of familiar with stuff that's going on. My husband thinks I'm so lame, but I'm like, please, we have to watch this. And one of the things I had noticed at one point, it was a little while back, and I'll just kind of use it as an example, it was about repositioning the sign in front of the town hall or something like that. And as a financial advisor, I'm so down to like, what are the wants here and what are the needs? And I think it's really important to focus on the needs and the budget and, really it's our money, and I want to make sure that it's important that we're focusing on needs and not silly things. So that's what I would focus on anyway.
Jess, it's funny that you asked that question because as I was having my nomination papers filled, I had an individual ask me what my agenda was to be on the Budget Finance Committee. Agenda. We don't have an agenda on the Budget Finance Committee. We look at the recommendations from the town manager and the recommendations from the select board as well and make our decisions based on that. Thank you.
I do have a few priorities that I'd like to look more closely at. One is an ongoing problem with fire and rescue and how we're going to deal with salaries as we move into the future. That's a looming problem that I think we need to start looking at, paying attention to, and doing a little bit more strategic budgeting so that we're in a better position to keep that department staffed. The other thing I'd like to look at is how we invest in our community. I know we have a lot of needs here. Nobody likes taxes, and I'm one of them, but we're doing an age-friendly community survey. We are asking the town of Raymond, what do you need to be able to age here in place? And just a comment, I'm listening to everything that's going on, and we talk about collaboration and ski programs, and I'd like to point out that all those collaborators, including Park and Rec, are volunteer organizations. They are staffed by volunteers, they struggle to find volunteers, and they need to raise their own money. So when we blithely talk about let's get more collaboration, sitting on budget and finance, then why isn't the town leading that charge? We sit back and expect it, I believe, but I'm not seeing much leadership to get us there. And I think one of the things we need to look at is how we do allocate the investments in our own community. So what that means, I don't know, because you have to, as we've just heard, what do we need first? And then who do we want to be? I think that's the question I would like to ask underneath that. Who do we want to be here in Raymond?
I see any more hands?
I think there's 4 seats open on budget finance, correct? There's going to be 4 spots.
That is correct.
Okay. There's one person that is not here tonight. His name is Kevin Oliver. I just wanted to put his name out there. He is running. He's a new dad, brand new dad. I think like 2 weeks is the baby is. So he did not make it tonight, but I just wanted to put that out there. Marshall, how are you going to replace Joe and be my information on my shoulder?
Joe has done a lot for this town, and he has presented some philosophies to the town and the way he manages the town, and I believe in most of those philosophies. Conservative spending, quality town assets, quality town roads, for example. There is an issue with the fire department labor, but I think in general we do have a good, high-quality fire department and things like that, and I would like to continue down that road. Okay?
Thank heavens Marshall mentioned roads, and I have an invitation for you folks. Thursday evening at the Pennell Town Complex and the Town Council Chamber, there is a meeting with MDOT about the North Raymond Road intersection in Dry Mills, Gray, Maine. And I know that you folks are impacted by that. I don't know exactly who, but I know that that is a conduit to get onto 26, to get onto the Wildlife Parkway, to get onto the Turnpike. And if you are interested, I really welcome you to come down and see the plan. Originally, there were 3 plans proposed. I think we time has passed and passed and passed, and I think we are now down to one plan that's being presented by MDOT. Brian Keyser is our project manager on that, and I know you would be welcome. And I would go so far as to say I would check into your being able to comment at a town meeting, at a Gray town meeting. I'm sure that would be allowed. But at least if you're interested and you travel that road every day, 2 ways, feel welcome to come down and have input and look at it, because we all know that that has been a terrifically challenging safety intersection, and we've been very fortunate that we have not had worse results by fender benders, side crashes, etc. So please feel welcome to come down.
So can you repeat the time?
Oh, I'm sorry. It is at the Pennell Town Complex, right in the village, in the Town Council chamber. I believe it starts. I have it.
7 o'clock.
Thank you. Ann has helped me here at 7 o'clock, and I would welcome any of your. It is Thursday evening, this Thursday, the 31st of May.
And the plan is actually on the town website,
Yes,
so you can go take a look at it if you want. Yes.
Thank you.
If I could follow up with you, Sue, on that one. To me, North Raymond Road should be a state road and not a town road. It does not start or end in the town of Raymond. It's a pass-through road. Do you know any reason why that's not a state road?
When we reach the 7,000 population, I'm sorry. When we reached the 7,000 population mark, we became part of the urban compact. And when you become part of the urban compact, there often are, with each town, there are individual exchanges about what is town-owned and what is state. So that I don't want to call it a contract, but I guess it is in a sense. That was negotiated about 8 or 10 years ago. And so I don't know if I would think that the town of Gray could have a conversation like that about if they felt certain changes needed to be made. But again, I think your input, and I do know that you folks are really impacted by that. So.
I'll just follow up as chair of the Bike Ped Committee. North Raymond Road is one of the roads that we've been looking at, and we proposed a sidewalk along from Dry Mills to Crystal Lake, because especially in the summer, kids use that that distance, or they travel that distance to the convenience store in the corner. And there are shoulders, but it's not really all that safe. For bikers too, I'm a biker, I'm a road biker, and that stretch of road, especially from Crystal Lake on up to the top of the hill before Egypt Road, can be pretty dicey to ride sometimes. So we've certainly been exploring with the town, ways to make that safer for all users. One of the things that we've written a draft of a complete streets policy for Gray, and we'll be presenting it to the council later this summer, I think. And the complete streets is just the idea that roads are not just for cars; they're for pedestrians and bikers as well, and just incorporating that into a policy for the town helps to sort of infuse that then, or embed that into all kinds of ordinances or negotiations with developers and that kind of thing. So, North Raymond Road, I live on North Raymond Road, so I'm totally aware of what you're saying. It's a tough road.
Do we have other questions for the candidates tonight? I saw Don raise his hand in the background, but I think he was waving.
He said time out.
Is that going to wrap it up tonight then? Any other questions? I guess I'd like to thank all the candidates for being here tonight. All of the great civic-minded residents for coming out. I'd like to thank the Raymond Vitalization Committee for organizing and pulling this together, and the Raymond Fire and Rescue for hosting us in their location.
Thank you.
Thank you.